Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3, and in this particular video I'm going to talk about computer programming skills that you need for a doctorate in business. So if you don't know me, I'm a professor of innovation, strategy, and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can, and this one particular question about the computer programming skills was asked me by Brian, and if you don't know the rules, if I answer this particular question from anybody that asked me a question, you have to go out and do something nice within the next hour. That's the name of the game, the whole reciprocity project. Just go out and do something nice to somebody. It doesn't matter who it is. You can call up your grandmother. You can send a nice email to somebody. You can go outside and pick up a little bit of garbage, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. So what programming skills, computer programming skills do you actually need for a doctorate in business? So I wouldn't actually think about the real skills or developing a particular sort of thing that you need for a particular program that you need to acquire before you get into a PhD program or a doctorate program. In general, if you are going to do any sort of research in a quantitative field, so first of all, I want to point out that you don't have to do any computer programming or do any sort of quantitative stuff. That's only if you want to. You could do qualitative research. It's a little bit more difficult in sort of more quant fields like operations or finance or maybe even accounting, depending on what you're doing. And in those kind of fields, then there's going to be an expectation that you do know how to do a little bit of programming, or you know a lot of programming, or you could do some sort of math. And it's just kind of a requirement to do that kind of stuff. However, there's lots of fields that you don't necessarily have to do that, like strategy or marketing. Anything like in that sort of way. There is a strong qualitative presence where people do that kind of qualitative interview kind of research and it's kind of normal. It's not necessarily unusual to do that, and that would be completely acceptable to do that. But if you're doing the quantitative stuff, I wouldn't think about the particular programs that you should be learning. So there's some common ones. You're basically going to need to understand a statistical program. A lot of people will learn SPSS, but I think that's kind of dying out at this moment. I think it's learned, and people get taught that in graduate school simply because it's easy to use. It's got kind of an easy to understand interface. But there's other programs that are becoming a lot more common, and right now the norm in most fields that are econ based or that are based on anything related to economics, it's going to be Stata is the norm sort of program that you should be learning. And it is sort of it has a pseudo sort of programming interface, and it's really nice to use. It's quite nice to use for a lot of different reasons. You can quickly do data analysis. It's built specifically for econometrics, so there's lots of things that are really friendly towards, say, things like panel data and things like that. Anyways, so Stata is the program that a lot of people use, but R is becoming a lot more bigger. And I think even people are starting to use, because data is getting bigger and it's becoming a lot more difficult to use these sort of statistical software. A lot of people are moving towards sort of really, especially in the quant stuff, are moving towards more rigorous sort of programming kind of style languages like Python, for example. I personally would recommend that you use Matlab because it is based for mathematicians and people that are in the sciences and engineering. There's some really cool things that they do, and the sort of stuff that you can draw and sort of do with it are phenomenal. And it's pretty much you could do anything in MATLAB. So that's why I would recommend sort of learning that. And if I was to do this all over again, I probably would have done everything in Matlab. And now I personally use Stata all the time, and it's just because that's what everybody used. And I understood Matlab before. It was just because everybody was doing that. So what you have to sort of look at and understand It is what is the general norm? What is everybody using? Because you're going to be working with other people and they're going to have to understand what you're trying to do. And so you have to look to see what the field is doing. I personally know I've programmed in many different languages and stuff like that, and it doesn't necessarily matter. This is what I want to point out. It's not necessarily the language that you should be learning in terms of a skill that you should be trying to understand. It's just basic logic that you should be really trying to focus on. All the languages are basically all the same. You can program in Visual Basic and it's going to be the same, or Fortran. In fact, a lot of people use Fortran because it is fast and it's still used, even though it's a very, very old language, because it's fast to use, and people are still using that to this day, particularly in the engineering fields. It's not unusual to see that. So it doesn't matter on the programming language per se, and I wouldn't fixate on that. You can do C++, you can use whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You're sort of looking at, and because there's always packages that you can use. Other people have used that, but it's the basic logic, and getting sort of familiar with that software is going to be the thing to think about. It's not necessarily the software itself that is daunting or that you should focus on. It's just understanding basic logic and not being afraid to jump into things and just getting and going with it. So you will learn it as you go, and that's probably normal and that's okay to do. If I was to do this today, and if I was you, I'd probably sort of focus on languages like Python or Matlab, or R is another one. Stata is used a lot. So I would still recommend that you try to think about those ones. They're all really good, and it's all just a matter of personal taste and which one you use and which one is more common in the particular field that you're going into. So hopefully that answered your question, and it's really what I would focus on is just understanding logic. If you haven't done programming before, I would take a couple of courses in programming. That's going to benefit you in sort of the quantitative stuff, where you understand like for loops and if statements and things like that. That really does help out a lot in understanding what you should do going forward. And just basic programming, learning basic programming is going to help you tremendously. So hopefully you like this video. Give me a thumbs up if you do subscribe to the YouTube channel. And Brian, I'm expecting you to go out in the next hour and do something nice for somebody else. All right, take care. Bye.